Welcome back to Money Talks, US, China, and Beyond. I'm Chris Lee. In our last episode, we explored the catastrophic scenario of a CCP's invasion of Taiwan, which could trigger a global conflict with the US and others, leading to massive human and economic losses, disruptions in trade, supply chain, and the markets worldwide. If you missed it, check it out. All right, so today, as promised, I'm going to dive into whether the CCP would actually follow through with the war over Taiwan. It's a big question, right? Are they really that crazy? Will they risk their country, their people, their economy, their stability to carry out a war over Taiwan or claim Taiwan? Let's explore that. Have you guys heard of Kyle Bass? He may not be as famous as Warren Buffett, but he's a big deal in the world of macro investing and hedge fund management. Remember the 2008-2009 financial crisis? Well, Kyle was one of the smart ones who saw it coming, and he made a fortune, like $700 million, just by betting against the market when many others were clueless. He's got this incredible grasp on the CCP and how it all works with investments. Just the other day on Bloomberg TV, he dropped a bombshell. He said if you put money into the CCP stock market index 16 years ago, you would actually be down by about a third of your investment by now. And here's the kicker. That's all happening while China's economy supposedly grew by over 500%. Crazy, right? Now think about it. If the U.S. economy had grown at even a tiny bit of that rate, the S&P 500 would have gone through the roof. So when it comes to the CCP stock market for long-term investing, it's a fool's game. In 2023, Kyle took matters into his own hands, funding and conducting in-depth research into the CCP's ambitions, plans, preparations for invading Taiwan. His study focused on three areas: military readiness, domestic civil preparation, financial and economic movements. It's a pretty comprehensive look. So let's start with the military. Now, Kyle acknowledged that he's not a military expert, but his findings came from conversations with top U.S. military and government officials. Here's what he shared: military drills. He pointed out the key exercises the CCP ran in 2023 and outlined what more they'll likely need to do to fully prepare their forces. He talked about timing. He explained how the weather and the sea conditions between China and Taiwan determine the best month for an invasion. Tactical plans. He reviewed the CCP's potential strategy, like cutting off Taiwan's water, electricity, and the mobile networks during an invasion. I'm no military expert either, but I also did some digging. Just wanted to see what's going on in 2024. The CCP has conducted two big military exercises: Joint Sword A in May and Joint Sword B in October. They were all about multi-domain integration, meaning combining land, sea, air, cyber, and even amphibious landings. And it's not just one time, a one-off deal. They are doing this constantly every day, adding more warplanes, ships, and even aircraft carriers to the mix. It's pretty obvious they are ticking all the preparation boxes for some serious action. There was this interesting article that caught my eye also, written by a former Navy SEAL intelligence analyst. Apparently, the CCP launches two intermediate-range ballistic missiles in 2024. One in September. Guess what time is the other one? On November 5, U.S. Election Day. Both were aimed at areas near Guam, where the U.S. got some major military bases in Pacific Ocean. The timing and the target choice. It's a pretty loud statement that U.S. assets, particularly in Guam, are definitely on the CCP's strategic radar. And then I found out back in 2023, the U.S. Strategic Command gave Congress the lowdown on what the CCP has been up to with their missile forces. They've been seriously ramping it up, doubling the number of land-based intercontinental missile launchers every year since 2000. Doubling every year since 2000. We're talking from 100 to over 400 units now. And that's already more than what the U.S. has. That's some serious buildup. But we do also have some good news as well. Our military pulled off an intercept of a ballistic missile in a test over Guam. It was the first time we've done something like that there. At least it shows that we are beginning to get our countermeasures in place. All right, enough for military. Let's shift gears. Let's shift gears and talk about the civil preparations and the economic moves the CCP has been making. Those are pretty eye-opening stuff as well, to say the least. Back into 2020, the CCP passed some heavy-hitting laws that could let them seize assets, money, and investments from foreign individuals and companies if war breaks out. And it's not just foreigners. These laws also target any company, Chinese or otherwise, that goes along with sanctions against China. The law also allowed them to tighten the screws on information, the data, banning the transfer of sensitive data out of the country under the guise of national security, of course. Now get this. They've been building 18 new shelters in Fujian province, right across from Taiwan. Those shelters were designed to withstand airstrikes. And the local government was so excited. They announced it, but I bet they got their butt kicked from the CCP higher-ups because 2 days later, all mention of it vanished from the internet. Gone. And the same story was the construction of the largest combat hospital in the same region. Same thing. Out one day, gone the next. They also staged emergency drills to manage largest scale power outages in the eastern region. And here's another twist. China's got this social credit system. It's like the credit score here in the US. But they have this crazy thing. The people with lower credit score in the system could get some harsh punishment. If you get a lower score, you could be banned from flying or taking trains. But what can help you boost your score? Giving blood. It's like they're stockpiling it. And somebody is clearly planning for something big. This whole thing feels eerily like what Putin was doing in late 2021. Remember how Russia started moving troops to the Ukraine border in October, and by December or January, they were prepping blood banks and other resources? Eye-popping, right? Okay, here comes the money part, the financial and economic side of CCP's strategy, starting with their assets. Over the last 20 years, Communist China has been exporting a ton of products, especially to the U.S., which allowed them to amassing a massive pile of U.S. dollars. Think of it as a person or company that made a fortune by selling stuff. What do you do with all that cash? You invest it, right? So where do you invest if you are a country with massive trillions in reserves? Typically, they will invest in the largest, most liquid market out there, the U.S. Treasury or U.S. government bond market. China got about $3.2 trillion in foreign currency reserves. They were big buyers of U.S. Treasuries from 2000 to 2013. And then here comes the twist. Starting in 2016, China began selling off U.S. Treasuries. And this accelerated from 2021 onwards, especially with those are the period when Fed started to raise interests, making those treasuries even more lucrative. For most countries, if the safest investment in the world is giving you a 4 to 5% annual return, you probably hold on to it. And even if you wanted to diversify a little, you won't sell too much. But overall, China have cut their U.S. Treasury government bond holdings by about $550 billion since 2016, which is roughly 40% of its peak. And while they're doing this, guess what they're buying? Gold. And lots of it. Seems like they're taking a page out of Russia's playbook, trying to get as much of their foreign currency assets out of U.S.'s reach as possible, making those as sanction-proof as they can. Then what about their debt? The money that China and the Chinese companies borrowed or owed to the foreigners. Over the last 20-some years, global investors and companies have pumped a staggering amount of money into China. The latest number in 2024 that I checked is about 2.6 trillion in 2024. This includes capital investments and loans. Technically, this is considered the debt in China's foreign currency reserves. Now, in theory, investors and companies, they could pull those money out anytime they want. So what has the CCP done to all their money? For one, the CCP has made it incredibly difficult for people to pull their funds out of China. David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, mentioned that many of his wealthy individual and the multinational company clients have been complaining about that they couldn't get money out of China over the past 5 years. And the CEOs of two other top Wall Street firms, Morgan Stanley and the Warburg Pinks, echoed the same concerns. And they all said this publicly in Hong Kong. The fact that those Wall Street heavyweights who wanted to maintain good relationship with the CCP and China for business are speaking out about it just shows how serious and widespread the problem has become. What could happen to their money if war comes? Pretty obvious. Then when it comes to the money the private Chinese companies borrowed, including those infamous real estate developers, many people heard about that, they're in trouble. There's some striking numbers too. According to Kyle's data, more than 65% of the foreign debt has been defaulted on, while only less than 19% of domestic debt has faced the same fate. This shows a clear difference, clear disparity in how Chinese companies are handling foreign versus domestic debt. Chinese companies have been selectively, if not strategically, defaulting on their dollar debt owed to foreign creditors. Why wouldn't they? If they know, especially in the case of a war, they may not have to pay those back. Now let's talk about some other economic moves by the CCP. Since June 2023, they've cut off all raw economic and financial data information feeds from private companies, which used to be a gold mine for foreign banks, investors, researchers, and universities. They wanted to invest in China. They want to have data, have information. Now, the only data you can get now is what the CCP published, what the CCP wants you to hear and see. Then from April 2023, all the major Chinese state-owned banks began unloading aircraft leasing contracts they had accumulated over the past 2 decades. These banks had invested billions of dollars in these contracts, capitalizing on China's growth. And now they're suddenly eager to sell them off. Sometimes they're even trying to sell everything they own. On the energy front, since 2022, the CCP has been bracing for potential energy shortages, especially in oil and natural gas, in case of sanctions. They've pivoted back to coal, the dirty and the cheap energy source. So much for the climate change, clean energy initiatives that other folks are really promoting. In 2023, China upped its coal imports imports by 50%, totaling 550 million tons. And they've kept this up in 2024 as well. Now, what's really astonishing is that the capacity of new coal power plants started in China in 2022 was six times that of the rest of the world combined. And the CCP has amassed about 70% of the world's green reserves, despite only having 20% of the global population. They claim by the end of 2022 that these reserves could feed Chinese people for a year and a half. But here's the thing. During the intense COVID lockdowns, when people were protesting anger out of desperation and hunger, now the single grain from these vast reserves was released. If not then, when? Whew. A lot to take in and digest, isn't it? Here's some more. Two recent leaks from anonymous but credible sources in China, reported by an independent media in the U.S., secretchina.com or Vision Times, shows that the CCP keeps charging forward. One, a recent leaked CCP directive dated December 7, 2024, orders all family members of military officers, from platoon leaders to generals, return to China by February 1, 2025. So, the CCP is worried about military family members being taken hostage. But the funny thing is, probably only those who would take hostages would feel that, right? Another one. In September 2024, the CCP military and the China State Department allegedly prepared a research report outlining proposed strategies against the second Trump administration. Several key ones are: 1. Further boosting military and economic aid to Russia to strengthen Russia's position during secret ceasefire talks, and encouraging North Korea to send more soldiers, more troops to fight for Russia, making it harder for the U.S. and Trump to broker a deal, to make a deal, because Russia is going to have higher demands. That's pretty obvious. 2, driving a wedge between the U.S. and its allies by portraying the America First policies as selfish and harmful to global partners. That's interesting. 3, using Trump's America First positions to improve ties with Europe, with India, with Japan, with South Korea, Australia, and the Southeast Asia countries. Good luck with that after the whole world sees how CCP bullies the Philippines. 4, strengthening ties with Middle East resistance terrorist groups, and secretly boosting their military and economic support to counter U.S. influence through Israel. Of course, no-brainer. These all make senses, and some are already in actions. But the most eye-catching one is this, involving Taiwan and the U.S. It's about the finalization of the plan to resolve the Taiwan issue by 2027. It was held as a key move against the pressure from the U.S. on trade, economic, and diplomatic fronts. It calls to avoid gradual steps like blockades or island captures. Instead, focus on a fast, intense strike using deception to catch the U.S. off guard, and then limit the time and the space for response. Now hear this out. Preparing for a decisive war in the Taiwan Strait with the United States. A war that could determine the fate of the nations. Wow. When you laid it all out like that, everything everything seems to be pointing in one direction. One direction, doesn't it? The real question now is, are the CCP and its leaders actually crazy enough to pull the trigger on this? Before we tackle that, let's circle back to the money aspect and check out a story about a company in China. This could shed some light on what's going through the minds of CCP officials. Now look at the stock price chart of the company. It's called New Oriental Education and Technology Group. You can see this massive drop in 2021 and 2022, right? This company used to be the biggest name in the English and the multidiscipline private tutoring industry in China and in the world. But now it's pivoted to being a live streaming e-commerce outfit. So what's the story here? New Oriental's story started in 1993 with just 13 students in a small, cheap classroom in Beijing. It was founded by Michael Yu, an English teacher who wanted to help Chinese students improve their English and prepare for the tough exam required to get into American colleges and the grad schools. Before you know it, New Oriental became the go-to place for anyone wanting to study abroad, and I was one of the students back then. Throughout the 1990s and the following decades, the number of students pursuing the path skyrocketed from 60,000 to 370,000 plus per year in 2020. Michael, with his unique combination of innovative teaching and a visionary entrepreneurship, tapped the growing demand for quality education and turned New Oriental into the most comprehensive private education company in China, and later the largest in the world. In 2006, Michael took New Oriental public on the New York Stock Exchange, making it the first Chinese education company to be listed in the U.S. At its peak, New Oriental was a massive operation, running 120 schools across more than 100 cities in China and reaching a market value of $33 billion. Pretty big for an education company. Now, despite being worth over $3 billion himself, Michael led a surprisingly frugal lifestyle. He's driving a modest sedan, wearing a $50 suit, yet they set up a trust fund that funded tuition for students and provided teacher training in poor rural areas of China. He was really celebrated as the model entrepreneur in both China and the U.S. Little did he know, his life and the future of New Oriental would be turned upside down in the spring of 2021. That was the time the CCP suddenly banned the for-profit private tutoring industry altogether. A $100 billion industry. The entire industry got wiped out. New Oriental lost 90% of its market value in a matter of months, closed all their schools, and fired 60,000 teachers. Later, it was forced to change its business model from teaching to live streaming e-commerce. As it turned out, the presentation skills their teachers had honed over years of teaching were actually a perfect tool for selling stuff online. And the CCP's official reason for the ban was to reduce excessive pressure and the burden on children. Laughable, isn't it? People actually believed that it was CCP's fear of losing the control of education privilege, or more precisely, the privilege to gaslight the children with communism ideology that actually led to this madness. Well, what might seem like madness to people living in normal, everyday society may be perfectly rational and illogical in the CCP's playbook. Now, if you're trying to get a better handle on the CCP's thought process, there's a book. There's a book I actually highly recommend checking out. It's called 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party. So the book was put together by a group of Chinese scholars living in the U.S. back in 2004. They used CCP's own official records, third-party accounts, and a lot of personal testimonies. Their goal was to encourage Chinese people, both in China and abroad, to take an honest look at the history of the CCP's reign, understand the truth behind the atrocities, and to collectively move towards a future for China that's more peaceful, just, and humane. But I found it super helpful for explaining some of the CCP's decisions to my Western friends. The book really digs into, the history, the ideology, the actions of the party, offering insights into their operational strategy and the underlying principles of their choices. It's like opening a window into CCP's mind, making it crystal clear why they do what they do. For example, the second commentary in the book talks about one crucial trait of the CCP, their intense desire for control. Once they seized the power in 1949, they kicked off a mind control campaign, establishing what they considered proper thoughts and the behaviors. It started within the party, but soon spread to everyone. These were framed as being in the national interest, but really they were about brainwashing people into compliance with the party's agenda. The aim was to mold society's beliefs and actions to match the CCP's ideology, leaving no space for independent thinking or opposition. Now, with that in mind, the ban on the private tutoring industry makes perfect sense, right? Its rapid growth was seen as a threat to the CCP's control over the minds of the populace. Party viewed this as undermining their authority, so they moved to shut it down. That's the story for New Oriental. Now let's circle back to the big question. Will the CCP and its leaders be crazy enough to pull the trigger on a war over Taiwan with the U.S.? We've gone through all the preparations they've been making for years, military expansions, hoarding resources, ramping up manufacturing and energy, making their money sanction-proof. And we've learned that the CCP wouldn't think twice about taking extreme measures to safeguard its rule and extend its control, both domestically and overseas. The risk is substantial, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Although no one has a crystal ball to predict for sure. But in my view, as things stand now, is that if the CCP remains in power, the likelihood of war happening is probably more than 50%. More than half of the chance. And maybe even as high as 60 to 70%. I've got to say, as an American with Chinese heritage, I still have a deep love for China as a country. Its culture, its history. I truly hope that we never see that war unfold. Though I believe it probably would take nothing short of a miracle if the CCP is removed from power or its complete dissolution to prevent a war from happening. Now, emotion aside, here at Money Talks US, China, and beyond, our focus is on helping you prepare for the worst, protect your money, and prosper. We're going to keep a close watch on developments, especially in the context of US versus the CCP. We're going to also explore other strategies for safeguarding your money going forward. So stay tuned. If you found this helpful, make sure you subscribe, like, share, and comment. We're going to see you soon with more updates and insights.